Yeah, they used to call it a jumpoline until your mama got on it.
All right, Paul, let's go for a ride. All right, Paul and I are out here hanging out, going for a ride. The sun's starting to come out. Thought we'd go through some of our top myths and misinformation or ideas that riders bring to us when we do training. So, Paul, what topic should we kick off with?
Well, I think one of the biggest ones is tires. That's the one that seems to have the most misconceptions about it. You know, that you gotta have knobbies or you gotta air down.
K60s or TKC80s, whatever else.
And then they ask us, you know, how come I'm not getting the mileage out of them? And because it's a knobby, and when you ride them on pavement, they melt.
When it's muddy and sandy and nasty, I mean, they do make a difference.
The only time that I've found that I really need them is when it's wet or when it's muddy.
Well, I'd say the secret for riders, or the advice I give them is, be realistic about what you're doing and where you're going. You know, if you're going to be in mud and doing crazy stuff, then absolutely tires are going to make a difference. But, you know, most adventure riding is pavement and hard packed gravel. So if you're going to just be on pavement and hard packed gravel, stick to a tire that's good for that, a 50-50 or even most of the time a 90-10. I mean, you and I both done the entire Washington BDR on basically street tires.
Yeah, on the Anarchy 3s, which are the stock tires for the 1200 GS now.
So what about airing down, Paul?
It seems to be very common. As soon as we're getting ready to leave pavement, we start getting questions, do we need to stop and air down our tires? Well, if you air down every time you get to the dirt, you know, are you going to air back up every time you get to the pavement? Because if you don't, you're going to wear your tires out a lot faster.
Most people don't have any idea how much off-road bikes actually air down. So you're coming in on an adventure bike and you're 36 to 40 pounds in your tires for the street. And they don't realize when you're out in the dirt, a bike with 15 PSI on a dirt bike is cranked all the way to the max. I mean, it's 8 to 15 PSI. And if you air down an adventure bike to 8 to 15 PSI, you're getting to pinching the tires, bending your rims, and causing all kinds. Plus, these big bikes don't have tire locks. You don't have wheel locks. So you spin, with all this horsepower, you spin the back tire right off the rim.
Yep, or braking hard with all this weight, and you spin the front.
Now, there are some times, I know, like when I'm airing up or airing down, there are some times, but ironically, for these big bikes, things are kind of backwards, because when I want to have air in my tires, when I'm going like over those really sharp edge rocks, so I can protect the rim, but yet that's also the time I want to have, you know, more flex around the tire to go around it, you know?
I tell them, if you want to air down, you know, if it makes you more comfortable, then by all means do it, but I start with, 10%. So if you're running 40 PSI on the street, maybe you drop 4 pounds out of it and go down to 36 PSI or something like that. Just to, because otherwise if you drop down to 20, you don't know how the bike's going to act. You don't know, what kind of damage you may end up doing airing down that low.
Well, and the tires make a difference. Hide nails are, everybody, that seems to be a really common tire still. But those sidewalls of those Eastern European bloc, post-Soviet bloc countries, I mean, those things are like irons. You can air those way down to get grip, but you get a TKC80 and air it down the same number, you're asking for trouble.
When we were, doing leg 2 of the BDR over the rocky areas, I would air down quite a bit just to absorb some of that, try to get the tire to bend around the rocks a little bit so it wasn't quite so bouncy. But even then, it still wasn't down below 25. But that was only with the hide nails. If I tried that with any other tire, I don't know if I'd have the same results.
So here's my advice for riders. Start with the factory recommended pressures from the tire manufacturer for that tire on that motorcycle. And then start by just trying 10% high or low above that, depending what you want to get out of the tire. Don't go crazy. And certainly, the other thing that I found is when we do training, the smoother you can ride a line, the less impact you have on things, the more you can air things down safely without causing damage to the bike or rim. So certainly, polishing skills and becoming much smoother about the road makes a huge difference. But don't go crazy on the air. Find a comfortable pressure that works both on and off road, and find an adventure pressure and stick with that. All right, I get to pick the next one, Paul.
Okay.
Throwing a leg. I mean, really? You're going to throw a leg on an adventure bike? Especially with these 1200 GSs that have these massive cylinder heads sticking out? Again,
well, they're these 48-liter boxes on the back, too.
Yeah, it's crazy. Well, but you watch them do it. Even dirt guys do the same thing. You watch them throw a leg, and they don't throw a leg, they drop a leg. They put it down below them as if they're going to stop this 800 pounds from tipping over. And as soon as your foot hits the ground, it gets ripped out behind you anyways. It's like, how ridiculous.
Yep, and it's one thing if you know what you're doing, if you're going to put a leg out and why you're doing it. Most of us put a leg out because we think it's going to break our fall, and all it's going to do is break your leg.
Yeah, I think this goes back to people not understanding where that comes from. And if you watch motocross racers, they put a leg out, but they throw that leg straight out in front of them. I mean, that ankle is over the front axle. And those bikes are leaned over so far, they're actually dragging their heel on the ground with that front, that foot sticking straight out in front of them. I mean, it's like, it's way, 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 way out there. And yet they think they're going to do that on an adventure bike? Give me a break.
They think that dirt bike guys put that leg out there to brace themselves in the corner. And what they don't realize is what they're doing is throwing that leg forward to get more weight on the front tire to increase their traction.
I've got one simple piece of advice for anybody that's ever heard to throw a leg or put a leg out on a big adventure bike. Don't do it.
I concur.
We get riders that come out, and like every new rider, you start by emulating what you see. You copy. That's reasonable. We all do that. But you come out, you stand up because you see everybody else stand up, but you have no idea why you're doing it. And then they're told, oh, well, you lower center of gravity. And other people say, well, no, you're going to make it worse. And some say you're less balanced. And it's that whole myth about standing and when to stand on the motorcycle.
If you're just standing up because you see everybody else standing up, you're missing the whole point. That, the idea of standing up has a few different purposes, but one of them is just vision. You get yourself higher up out of the seat so you can see better.
Well, and I think that's the one thing that you can say standing will always give you. I mean, of all the other ideas about lowering or raising center of gravity or making the bike more nimble underneath you, whatever it is, vision is the one positive that always comes out of standing.
Change your vantage point. You get higher up, you can see farther down the trail.
When I was riding in Africa with Miguel, we ended up on this nasty back highway, and of course the highways there are, well, it's a relative term. So it's this paved road with these potholes. It looks like somebody's been firing mortars into the road. And for me, I didn't need to stand up for traction. I stood up so I could get shadow on these holes, so I could see where they were, so I could avoid them. Because if I dropped into the holes, I was sure to pinch a tire, bend a rim. And I'm just puttering through this, kind of swerving around this. Look at my mirror, and Miguel's nowhere to be seen. And Miguel's got a lot of miles. That dude's he's got over 100 countries under his belt. He rides, that's all he does. But the difference was I was standing, could pick up those shadows, and I could figure out what was going on when he had no idea. He was right on top of it. It made a huge difference.
Being able to change your angle and your point of view, even if you think you see something, stand up for that little bit, change your point of view of it. Maybe you get a different input or different information that comes to you just from changing your angle a little bit.
Well, the other one, is uncoupling or coupling with the bike, because it's that whole idea that you lower center of gravity. And it can be true, but it's not always true. And the difference is how you couple to the bike. If you stand up and you're locked in and your legs are straight, and if that bike moves up and down and your head's following it, moving up and down, you're not uncoupled. All you've done is raise the entire center of gravity. It's when you let those knees flex. And so if that bike is moving around, it's like watching an ostrich run around, and they have that head, and their whole body's moving, but the head never moves. If that's the way you ride, then you've actually removed your mass, your body mass from the equation and made things much lighter. But guys who just stand up and lock into place, which is what most do because they don't know why they're doing it, that's where the secret is that a lot of people aren't picking up on.
Yep, I would agree with that.
Well, and it's a far more complex subject than even just those two, but those are certainly the two that well, one that's a major win and one that's kind of the biggest topic. But again, I'd say, advice for riders is that yes, standing, you need to be able to stand, so that becomes your default position. So you're more comfortable standing than sitting on the bike. But more than that, you got to know why you're doing it, become comfortable letting that bike move around underneath it. I've mentioned it before, but it's got to be natural for you as a rider.